want to see. This is not reality, it's just another show. Tell me what you need, I'm giving you all you need. She was beautiful, it's not beautiful. She was beautiful, it's not beautiful. Tell me what you see, what you want to see. This is not reality, it's just another show. Tell me what you need, I'm giving you all you need. She was beautiful, it's not beautiful. And then that artist gets a certain number of streams, right? Because it's pushed by the streaming services. Because the streaming services actually have a lot of control about what gets streamed and what doesn't. But what the streaming service says to its investors, like, look, I've got 10,000 tracks, right? And the investor goes, ooh, you're just, you're going to dominate the market soon. And once you have a monopoly, then you can raise the amount that you charge for subscriptions. And then, you'll be able to break even though you're losing right now money. You are losing money because you are competing for market dominance. So it's basically money that you're using to compete for market share. They do the calculations based on, advertisement, which is basically in China extremely, extremely low because there's a lot of, inflated numbers. So the advertiser's not willing to pay a lot for advertisement. And besides, the advertisement model is like super outdated. I don't understand why to this day, after 60 years, that's the only way that we can find to fucking capitalize on IP. But so then this company basically sends the calculations to the record label. And this calculation will probably say, like, we gave you 10 million and after two years, you played enough for like maybe 300,000. But it doesn't mean that they take the money back. So the 300,000 is divvied out to the artist, but the company gets to keep the other 9 million and 700,000. I mean, maybe it's not that extreme. Maybe it's 7 million, but
it's definitely something where the artist is having to fight an uphill battle.
The artist is trying to fight an uphill battle. The remaining prepaid amount is not divvied out, and there has been no lawsuit yet to divvy it out. And I'm waiting for one day for artists to get smart enough to do a collective action lawsuit. And so it's but the most the most important thing about that system is that there is no incentive to create social culture around music anymore. There's no incentive for a smaller culture or a niche culture to grow. In a smaller culture, like say punk rock culture, in the old days, you used to completely be outside of the mainstream system because, fuck that anarchy. I'm going to make like basically copied cassette tapes and sell them at my shows. And that's how I'm going to make a living, going to squats, illegal parties, copied cassettes. And a lot of punk bands made a decent living doing that for many, many years. Just playing in somebody's garage for like $3 entry for a bunch of teenagers in the neighborhood that were super happy to be there. They were going there, basically ripping up their parents' garage. The band would get paid $300 at the end of the show and then sell $500 worth of cassettes. And that they could live off of that. Those were, but as things start to regulate, okay, now you can't have illegal shows. You can't be in that garage space doing set up a random show, or now we're going to do IP protection, or somebody is going to steal your money if you don't go and sign up with this agency, so you have to sign up with this agency. If you don't sign up with this agency, whether it's like Gamma or it's Asim or it's it starts with an A. I'm horrible right now about this. Then your music will not be protected, and somebody will take that cassette tape, load it up on the internet, and you will have no protection. So you have to do it you have to belong to that institution. And that institution has a certain number of fees that they collect. So by the time you get your money in 2 or 3 years, by the time you figure out how you get paid, you have to go and get your cassettes made at a place, and then you are charged by your own agency for burning your cassettes. So the entire music industry basically is set up right now, at this day and age, to destroy niche culture. Because if you are a major, if you are a Rihanna, you can take from ghetto gothic. You can suck up their culture, put it on yourselves, go and produce something with ghetto gothic producers, and then do an album, and then that niche culture becomes part of the mainstream, but only in style. The ideology behind it, well, maybe only a few drops of it will trickle in, but it will be diluted. It will be diluted behind materialism. It will be diluted behind fashion. It will be diluted behind other things. And that niche culture, once it's been diluted, will no longer exist. And people will know Rihanna as the ghetto gothic artist.
Do you have any... some of the questions I have to ask are dumb, unfortunately, because my level of familiarity between China and the U.S., much more familiar with the U.S. So Patreon is, for me, very interesting in that a lot of the artists or intellects that I really like are on Patreon, or they heavily use Patreon. Particularly for podcasts, it's been really successful with things like Chapo Trap House or Michael Brooks, or sort of like really interesting left-wing thinkers. I'm sure the right wing uses it too. But is that offer any hope for China-based artists, sort of the crowdsourced or crowdfunding model?
I think there's been a lot of companies that have tried crowdfunding recently in quite a lot of trouble music kits. There's lots of companies that try a fair amount of crowdfunding. Yeah. The problem is crowdfunding means that people need to trust that their money is going to the people that they like, and people have to be able to pay into it. Now, here's like an example. Like with Kickstarter, right? There was a lot of controversy when Kickstarter first started because they said that it took so much money for the person to basically, they would take their fees and then the artist would. So there was like a lot of things about Kickstarters basically using you giving the money to the person. So they had to run this huge campaign to make Kickstarter look a little bit more friendly and not just a middleman who's taking the money away from the creator, but a platform that has a genuine service. So they started like basically getting the real hipster kids that were the super indie kids to come and do stuff on Kickstarter, which they paid them for, in order to or they gave them a lot of promotion in order for them to start using Kickstarter to basically legitimize the institution to people who use that institution as a trust, as a public trust. Right. But the idea of public trust in China is very, very rough. People don't trust each other. And so when you have a society that on a general basis doesn't trust each other, people want to be physical with their art. So far as like, if I go to your show and I physically buy a CD off of you and I see you in the eyes and I give you a hug, then I feel an immense amount of trust has been exchanged. But if somebody asks me to go through an app or go through something else to support my artist, and this is what Ali Planet also kind of, I think, maybe was part of their downfall, but I'm not completely sure. That means that I have to invest my trust in an institution. And I have been taught since I was a child that everybody's lying to me, that everybody wants something from me, and everybody is greedy, and everybody is trying to get their bit. I don't trust that these institutions exist for the public good. I trust that institutions exist for their own good. And the fact is, that kind of cynicism probably would work better in Silicon Valley, because Silicon Valley, actually, there's a lot of institutions that kind of lie and say, I'm doing it for the public good. I mean, God, don't be evil. It's almost like proclaiming you're evil, right? But in China, so when you do stuff like Patreon, that is a trust. That is a place of public trust where people put their money in order to get to somebody, thinking that there is 3 levels of trust. I trust the artist will use my money for good. I trust the service will do their jobs and not take my money. And I trust the entire interaction will not be interrupted by the greater market or by the government, by something else, that in the middle of this exchange, something like a shock will happen to basically destroy all of my trust and my investment. The other level is called, very simply, I think people really don't think about is expendable income. The average income, or the median income in Beijing, is 19,300 USD, something around that. I think recently I just did a presentation on this. So if you talk about $19,000, it seems like a lot, right, for a developing country. But it's not a developing country, it's a developed country. And we're talking about a place where the average house costs over $1 million US, or €1 million now, even not $1 million US. So the amount of, the CPI is very off kilter, like consumer price index. So as a result, like the average person, their money, when they spend it, it's not like they need it to be physical, because there's not a lot of it. So you'll find that when people have a less of a feeling of expendable income, because you have a feeling of expendable income when your rent is cheap, when you can buy a car easily with your income, when you know that you have enough money for medicine. So even if you have $1 million in the bank, but you have this constant fear that you're not going to be able to pay your medical bills, that you can't buy a house, and you might get kicked out of the one that you're living in because the rent is progressively going up. Even if on paper you have a fair amount of expendable income, you don't have that feeling of expendable income. So you're going to have to follow me for the next step. The next step is that when you don't have this feeling that you have like this big, beautiful bag of money, like Donald Trump would like to say, in somewhere, which is floating, and you can use it for whatever you want. Yeah. Then you're less likely to make, I would say, exchanges online that are large amounts, which are for causes that you can't see, that you can't feel, that you can't touch. You're more likely to go get a meal or order something that's physical or buy a good like this than you are to make this kind of donation to an artist, like what Patreon essentially is. Now, are you going to get more enjoyment out of, like, say, your 3,000, RMB pair of sneakers, $500 pair of sneakers? Well, I mean, you do get a little rush of dopamine, and you might feel a little bit of personal pride, but you might listen to a track of hip hop like 100 times more than you look at that pair of shoes. And like 2 months from now, there'll be another $500 pair of sneakers. That's cooler and hotter and whatever. But for the average person who doesn't have this big bag of imaginary money in the back, who doesn't, who can't afford the house with this incredibly off-kilter CPI, it's going to be much harder for that person to spend $500 to give to an artist of theirs to help them make a track that they will listen to for probably more hours of day than they ever wear those sneakers, because they're just sitting in the closet most likely in their sneaker collection, which will not go up in value as much as they think it will, unless, of course, there's even more collectible bullshit. I mean, they told us now that sneakers are the most valuable things on earth, and tomorrow they'll tell us, I don't know, maybe tampons or something. I don't care what it is, but there will be something that they will inflate, and it will be easy to inflate because we need something physical. And as long as it's physical and the value is somehow magical, as long as it's physical, Chinese people will want to invest in it more until the CPI is balanced out.
To pivot to the abstract, um, two of the scenes I'm really interested in, obviously, are rock and roll, but also hip hop.
Right. I don't know enough about hip hop, by the way.
About hip hop, but for the rock and roll scene, why, despite all these pressures, does it continue to exist, even if it's on as very...
It's not pressured. That's the big lie. The idea that there is this massive, horrible pressure that is on your back. I mean, I come from Los Angeles, where bands are basically broke, and they could, because there's so many of them, there's not that many places to play, and you have to haul your own gear there, so it's not that fun. China, like I've talked about CPI and stuff like that, but no matter how much there's still a need for entertainment. And shows are physical. Going to see shows are physical. Buying a CD is physical. Going to a record store and thumbing through a record store is physical. These are physical things, direct physical interactions. And people do need socializations in different ways and different styles, and going to a show is a form of socialization. Belonging to a group of people that look very similar, like rock and roll has for a long time been the voice of niche culture. No matter how much the larger environment is trying to pressure out niche culture is also a part of human society. We don't want to belong to everything. We want to belong to the thing that we think we belong to, and we want to find similar people. And music, in a way, is a gathering ground for people who are similar to our ideology, or similar to just the way that we picture ourselves to be, or we wish that we were. And so it's not just rock and roll. To say that rock and roll, why does it continue to exist despite all of these pressures? Why does authors or good writers or independent films exist despite all of these pressures? Why do documentarians still go into places they're not supposed to go and film shit when it's not supposed? Human nature is by nature to go against this greater norm and create little niches, to do different things, to be explorers, to try stuff. And then other people are attracted to that group of people. And so rock and roll is one of the most physical and obvious things out there for niche culture. It was for a long time the biggest voice of rebellion. I think now it's become just a very, I would say, mainstream form of entertainment as well.
And for those niches or scenes, what are some of the what are some of the reflections of society that you see people trying to answer or explore?
I wish I saw more.
Scenes?
I really wish I saw more. I saw more in the early 2000s. I saw more in mid 2000s. I think the reflection has become just self-reflection, if anything. It's not, the rebellion has turned to hubris, in my opinion.
Can you expand on that? That's an interesting concept.
Oh, God, if I expand on it, I'm just going to piss people off. I think it's better I just don't. I have to protect my friends, or people who are not my friends, at least not have them yell at me all the time. What?
Is there maybe an American corollary you could use?
I could point at a lot of different factors, but lack of rebellion. Whenever